this is Dr. Heike Bielek from Into Infinity, and in this series I'm going to explain to you how dimensions of space are created. When we think about space and dimensions and 3D, we think about, there's an X, Y, and Z axis, so 3 vectors. You could say, well, that's a cube right here. X, Y, and Z axis. This is 3D. 0D really doesn't have any width, length axis. It has no vector defining this point, so this is the 0D. It also relates to how the universe began, because in science it's all about the singularity, where everything was compressed infinitely small into a dot. What's happening then? Well, if you move the dot, i.e. you translate the dot, it creates a line, and the line doesn't have a thickness, but it has a length. There's a dot here, there's one vector that defines that line, 1D. Now, if we would continue this pattern, this line moves into another direction. Interesting, that's 90 degrees. And when it moves, it creates this area. So it has a length and a width. And that is 2D, because every point here can be defined by 2 vectors. So one goes here and one goes there, and it defines the dot there. Basically, the line translates and creates this plane. Now, if we take the plane and we move it into a third direction, well, that creates the cube. And really where it all started was here in the corner. But that doesn't really exist in nature, does it? Everything is in equilibrium. So I'm going to show you now how really the dot creates these dimensions through rotation. So 0D is still the same, right? Instead of just like translating into one direction, the dot actually splits into 2. You know, like the number line, infinite positive, infinite negative, and that kind of creates this equilibrium. And then what can happen, and this is really what you're doing with geometry, with the drawing compass, you're rotating that line. And when you rotate that line, well, it actually creates a circle, right? Because you're rotating it, and it creates this area of a circle, and that is 2D. And the circle we know is like the all-encompassing form, because all other shapes like the square can actually be inside of that. Now, if you take the circle, what happens when you spin a coin? It rotates into 3D space, and then it creates a sphere. And so let's say that was our 2D plane, and we rotate it that way, we create a sphere. And that really makes a lot of sense when it comes to, you know, how the universe works, because everything is rotating. The Earth is rotating around itself, all the planets are rotating around the galaxy. But besides the translational model that included the cube and the square, and the rotational model, which is based on the sphere, there is a third model, which incorporates one of the most famous sacred geometry symbols, called the seed of life. So it starts with a circle, and then you create these overlapping circles. In fact, there are going to be 6 around 1. And once you have that, you have actually 6 points that make a hexagon. So if you connect these 6 points, say I take a green one, that's one line, second line. So now if we look at the seed of life again, so we have these 3 axes, X, Y, Z, at the moment creating this hexagonal pattern here, familiar in snowflakes. I'm just going to lay that on the top. And now what happens is that if I take that into 3D space, well, what could I do? If I could only rotate these things, well, they're fixed in the middle. I can definitely rotate this up and down. So now all of a sudden we got like a north and a south. And then these 2 lines, they can spread out. It creates this intrinsic 90-degree angle between all of the lines. So you have a 90-degree angle between the yellow and the blue, because they spread out. And then you got a top and the bottom, and they're all 90 degrees to each other. And that really looks like a 3D cross, doesn't it? Now, what kind of shape is that? If you think about connecting all of these points together from the outside, that creates a triangle here. And that creates a triangle here, and a triangle here, and then you got the same on the bottom. From the outside, it really creates this shape. This is the octahedron. Octa because it's eight triangular faces, and it's a pyramid with an upside down pyramid on the bottom, like a diamond. And that really is the shape that the seed of life is creating through rotation into 3D. And what's really, really cool about this is that the octahedron is one of the 5 Platonic solids, and it is in fact the first one we find in the atom. All of the noble gases have this shape, and it makes perfect sense how this space is created from this flat 2D space via rotation. Mathematically speaking, we saw how dimensions of space are created via the translational model, where the beginning was all coming from a dot at the corner of the cube. Whereas the rotational model depicts how the dot can divide in equilibrium 2 ways to create a line. The line can rotate to create a circle, and the circle can rotate to create a sphere. Adding to that, we saw how 7 circles create the seed of life, which give rise to 3 vectors, which can rotate into 3D to create the structure of the octahedron. And when we put all 3 models together, we see how the octahedron can in fact sit inside of the cube, and all of these Platonic solids can be wrapped inside of spheres. And this is exactly what we find in the atomic structure. Thank you all for watching. My name is Dr. Heike Bielek from Into Infinity, and if you're curious to know more, don't forget to subscribe in the link below.